That sounds
All
great.
right.
So, good morning, everybody. I'm excited to do this class with you. Let me introduce myself briefly, and then I'm going to share my screen and kind of give you an overview of my plan for this. But the idea, the overarching idea here is this isn't so much a class as a workshop. This is an experiment, you know, and we're going to figure it out together. And I have some structure to it, but where we go is really dependent on where this group wants to go and how much people feel brave about participating. So I'm hoping that you all feel brave. Be brave. This is good. So I'm Liza Hanks. I'm an estate planning attorney. I practice in Mountain View, California, although since COVID, I've been working gleefully from home in San Jose with my dog, who I just threw out of my office because sometimes he barks and he's very upset with me. So I've been an estate planner for 20 years, and this class comes out of my sense that somehow we're missing the boat with legal documents, that we're missing the bigger point about what it really means to leave a legacy, that it's so much more than the conversations people generally have with me about the efficient transfer of property. And so I've gotten curious about that over the last couple of years. And this class comes out of some of that sense that there's a lot more to say and that there may be a lot more ways to say it. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. This is my plan anyway. Let's see. All right. I'm hoping you can see my screen. Can everybody see? Can you see it? You see the slide? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So hold on. So why isn't, let me just, there we go. So this is a 3-part class. The first one is today, and the idea is to think about what we've been given. So to start with the idea of legacy by looking backwards, okay, and thinking about gifts that we've been given that were deeply meaningful to us. And I'm not talking about big things, they can be small things. And I'm going to give you a bunch of examples today. And then I'm going to throw you into the deep water and ask you to come up with your own story about a meaningful gift. So first, we're going to look backwards. The next class on the 24th, so not so long from now, is a chance to get mindful about where we are right now and what we have that we might want to give. And again, that can be money, but it can be memories, it can be recipes, it can be objects, it can be stories, it can be a lot of things. So that's going to be a personal inventory class. And then in our last class, we're going to focus on how to do it. So after thinking about why it's important, that's today, and then what it is that we might want to give, so create a vision for ourselves. In the third class, you know, and maybe that's where my lawyer legacy can help, is figuring out ways to make it happen. How are we going to do it? And hopefully you'll leave this workshop with a blueprint, or maybe even a legacy that you've already committed to leaving. So that's the idea here. And again, as I said, I do think legacy should be broadly viewed as much more than money. So, you know, I'm a mom, I love poetry, I love helping people put estate plans together. You know, for 20 years, I've done this for thousands of people, but I really feel like in some ways, all of the legal documents totally miss the point. And what I want to challenge you to think about is your legacy isn't your will or your living trust. It's not your checkbook or your mutual funds. It's the love you shared with your family while you were here and the legacy that you leave behind when you die. So I'm framing that now. So here's a quote I find kind of inspiring. You know, give what you have to someone who may be better than you dare to think. So I think a lot of us feel like because we're not bazillionaires, we don't have much to give. And I really want you to leave this class not feeling that way. And this is a part of a poem that was in the course workshop by a poet named Alberto Rios. And if I knew how to use Zoom better, I'd ask one of you guys to read this. But for today, I'm just going to read it. So we give because someone gave to us. We give because nobody gave to us. We give because giving has changed us. We give because giving could have changed us. And what you didn't have, I gave you. What I had to give, and together we made something greater from the difference. So I find that pretty inspiring. So the question for today is, what gifts were deeply meaningful to you? And I wanted to give you some examples. And they come from a website that I put together last year called What Lives Longest, because I wanted to ask that question. I want people to tell me what has lived longest for them. So the stories I'm going to share today come from that website. And my invitation to all of you is that if you send me your stories at the end of today, I'll post them there. And then other people can read your stories. And hopefully we can inspire, each other. So here's a story about a ring. And I'm going to read it to you. I have a few of these, and I hope it's not boring hearing my voice. Maybe next time I'll figure out how to get you guys to read it. So my father bought my mother this ring around 1960 from Eddie's Antique Jewelry in Liberty, New York. My father rarely bought gifts for anyone, believing, I think, that they were a waste of money on frivolous things. He was a child of the Depression, so that was understandable. When he presented the ring to my mother, he announced the ring cost $40, proclaiming his generosity. My mother, who, by the way, is my aunt, always wore the ring until she died at 52. I asked to have the ring, and my father agreed. For many years, never wore it, feeling that its style was too ostentatious. When I turned 52, I began wearing the ring, and I haven't taken it off since. My style has evolved from hippie to eclectic nostalgic. The ring is now missing stones and has acrylic paint embedded in the cracks. I tried to get the stones replaced, but the prongs were worn and the stones soon fell out. I accept the ring as is, like me, warts and all. That attitude would have suited my mother. My niece just had a baby, Amelia Jane. The baby is intrigued by the ring. I love that the baby is connected to my mother, Amelia's great-grandmother, through the ring. I'm not sure yet to whom in my will I will leave the ring. So that's from Laura Shapiro in New York. This one is the book. Poetry book with her handwritten signature in the form of her maiden name. When I touch her script, I feel as if she touches me. So that's from a woman named Patricia Savage, and a picture of the inside of the book. Here's a history. I think maybe I won't read this whole one. This is something I wrote about a woman who died, and her name was Judy Young, and she was a librarian. But her contribution was she realized that no scholars were studying the experience of Chinese American women in ordinary life. And seeing that hole, she decided to fill it, eventually writing or co-writing 8 books, including Unbound Feet, A Social History of Chinese Women in San Francisco. So I love this because she was 5 of 6 children born in Chinatown. Her father was a janitor, her mother sewed clothes. She got a master's degree in library science from UC Berkeley, but over the course of her life, she became a historian, and her work included translations of poetry written by Chinese immigrants. So basically she gave voice to a whole bunch of people who had no voice. And I think that's a pretty great legacy too. This one's called A Letter. It's from a woman named Mary Jo Reading. My grandmother was the first person in our family to attend and graduate college. As the daughter of first-generation immigrants from Italy, she was proud. And so when each of her grandchildren went off on their way after high school, she began to write her famous letters. Famous because each of us received the same letter every week. She would sit and make handwritten copies for all 5 of us. And these letters became famous with my roommates and friends too. Rereading these letters now, after life's ups and downs, navigating joys and losses, I'm struck by the wisdom I'm ready to hear now. So I think I'm going to post these at Avenidas, and Kat will help me do that so that you can read them yourself. But you can see that in finding my own voice, I'm not alone. Grandma paved the way. I'm just reading the end. In life, her bigness embarrassed me. Now I hope to be big like her, loud like her. Be a bother, she would always say. So. And lastly, and this is actually this is the last one, the second to last one. This is what spawns this whole project, was this crazy story that I read in the Chronicle about this woman, Maggie Mason, who found a plastic recipe box at the Alameda Flea Market. It was intact, but it was mysterious. There were 800 recipes that were clearly well-loved and stained from use. But the woman who collected them remains unknown. Maggie started to share the recipes on Instagram, posting one a day, calling the project the Kitchen Committee. And followers on the site claim a recipe and promise to make it within the week and post comments and feedback. Some favorites: home-baked beans, broccoli with corn, cheese, and candied sweet potatoes. The project has a devoted following with more than 2,000 followers. And I love it because it has so many things in it, a devotion to recreating vintage recipes, a community created around cooking, and the very idea that something so everyday as a recipe box can evoke long-buried memories of taste and family meals eaten while young. As Maggie said in the article, for someone like me who doesn't have a family recipe box that's been passed down, it can sort of become a surrogate family recipe box. And this is a picture of her taking a picture of one of the recipes to post on Instagram. And lastly, this is a picture of a paperweight that I got from an uncle. When I was a kid, maybe 5 or 6, I endlessly played with my uncle's collection of crystal paperweights when we came to visit. He had no wife or kids, lived alone in an urban apartment in Philadelphia, and used a strong cologne that made me slightly nauseous. I felt out of place there and uncomfortable, and the only thing I liked to do was play with his paperweight collection, endlessly rearranging them, creating stories and worlds. I loved their smoothness and their heft, and I couldn't imagine how they had magical things inside of them floating, suspended, caught. I felt like that too, suspended in an apartment with wall-to-wall white carpeting, terrified of spilling my food or breaking something by accident. In my house, art was something that lived at a museum, another outing I found tedious. To have a collection of objects was considered louche, bourgeois, uneducated. But my uncle loved those paperweights so much that he had 20, maybe 30 of them on his glass table, and he didn't care who knew. I found it thrilling. It was the only thing about him I liked back then. Years went by and he died. And 10 years after that, my father died too. And when we were cleaning out the storage area for his apartment, my sister and I found this box, long unopened, and we opened it and the treasure spilled out. The paperweight collection, neatly wrapped, intact. I still love them. Some sit on my desk at work. Others sparkle in the window of my home. I still love their smoothness, their heft, and their crystalline beauty. That there are so many makes it each one more precious. And to me, they're a testament to joy. And actually, I'll share one. See, I have one right here. So those are my examples. So maybe what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off the screen share and I'm going to open this to questions, I think. And then I'm going to ask you to take 10 minutes. I think 10 minutes is about right. I don't know if it's too long. Maybe if it's too long and you raise your hand, we can end it sooner. But I'd like you to consider writing your own story.
No, I'm sorry. No, I don't have any of this.
Okay. So, and if you have a story to tell, these are the 3 questions. What did you get? Who gave it to you? And why is it meaningful for you? So that's when I'm going to stop the sharing. Okay. So first, before we do some writing together, are there any questions or anything that people, want to share?
You can feel free to unmute and talk as you like.
Crickets.
I did find that Kitchen Committee Instagram page that you mentioned. That is really cool.
Yeah.
You just see it's really interesting just to see all the different types of recipes. There's like a newspaper cutout and it's just really cool. It's
Well-
life, I guess, too. It's just interesting to see pieces of someone's life like that.
Yeah. Is there anybody who would like to, has a question about this idea or anything that they want to share before we do some writing? Like I said, this is an experiment. I
Karen?
want to see how it lands. Yeah. Do we have someone?
Yeah, Karen Yamashita.
So, Liza, I like the paperweights because the fact that, you know, just on the face of it, they're sparkling and pretty, but they don't have meaning for us. So for you to share that about your uncle and the uncomfortable childhood feelings gives this whole project a specialness that you don't see when you just look at the object, I think.
Right, right. I think some of this is about the stories, isn't it? That we can tell each other. So this is like my secret plan, which is that I think we could inspire each other to be more generous if we were more open about what it means to receive something lovely. Like, you know, because so much in this culture is about, you know, giving away money. But sometimes the most meaningful things that we've received from people can be as simple as a picture or a song or a story, right? So it's the meaning we attach to the objects more than the objects themselves, I think. I don't know, what do you guys think? Okay.
I have a comment. I'm trying to get rid of things and declutter. I have a cluttering problem. And I'm also looking at my mom's things as she enters the end of her life and what of her stuff I want. And I don't have room for everything and I have to be so selective. And also I've learned that a lot of people don't want other people's things, even the hand-me-downs from earlier generations. So I have a little struggle about that because I got too many little things already. And I don't know if other people want my little things.
But they might want your stories about the things, right? They might, I mean, it's funny that you should say that because the reason we had to change the date of this class was because I had to go down to a memorial service in LA for my 95-year-old stepfather who just passed away. And as a result, my other office at home is full of 10 boxes of my mom's things. She died 10 years ago, but we left her things in that house until he passed, so he would feel like it was still home. So I get that, absolutely, that sense of like sort of this crushing burden of stuff, right? Like, what do you do with your dead mom's driver's license, for example?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I actually threw away last week, but I know, because I don't want stuff either. But I guess I just want to encourage people to think it's more than stuff, right? Like it's the stories about things or the stories about your lives or the experiences that you've had that can be the most meaningful things we can share, right? And those aren't physical objects.
Yeah.
So, yeah, does anybody else want to share?
I want to, hi Liza, it's Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
When you were talking about sharing stuff and then sharing the stories that go with the stuff, my broader view of this is don't just transfer the money, but transfer the knowledge that the person had. And I think I've shared the story with Liza before, but my father-in-law, who passed away at 95, was adored by his grandchildren as, you know, a very, most importantly, a very generous grandfather, but also they just admired his investment knowledge. And when I married into the family in 2003, my father-in-law came to me and said, you know, can you read my will and tell me if I did everything right? Because, you know, you're a certified financial planner, you know this stuff. And what struck me is don't just give the money when you die, give the knowledge while you're alive and teach the grandchildren good habits. And again, I don't want to make this all about money, but it was just taking their admiration of him and turning it into a one-on-one tutorial session and developing good habits and having 10 years of that before he passed away. And just being a part of it and watching it unfold, and now seeing how these kids are honoring the inheritance that they did get and how well they treat it. I'm just so happy that that 10 years of knowledge transfer and bonding and love and all that was able to be gifted. And it's so much more important than just the money that, you know, came 10 years later. So thanks for letting me share.
You're welcome. Is there any other, I mean, another thing you could do is write a family history. I have a family history that, you know, I have had clients who found that to be a really meaningful exercise too, to just, you know, there's really easy, like even built into Microsoft Word, there's a dictate button that you can, if you have you can hit dictate and talk, and it turns your talking into words. It's a really easy way to capture ideas and thoughts. You know, so you could maybe just set aside some time every week and dictate a little bit on your computer and capture some family stories that will be gone. Once you die, those stories don't last if they're not written down. So that's another idea. Does anybody else like to share?
Yeah, what's the value of allowing family to choose their own notion of what they want to keep that's important, as opposed to you choosing it for them?
There could be a lot of value in that. Absolutely. I mean, you don't even have to wait till you're dead. You know, you could invite people to, you know, I suppose if you're downsizing is a good time to invite people in to pick things that have value for them. And then you can talk to them too. You can share things with them about what that was, how that, I mean, I don't want to focus so much on objects. I'm sorry if the presentation felt like that's what we were doing. But yeah, of course, there's lots of reasons that people can pick things that have meanings for them. You know, in a way, this class, what I was hoping people could do is think a little bit retrospectively about things that they've received that were valuable to them first, before we go to the next step, which is what we would like to convey or provide to the next generation after we're gone. Does anybody have any? Well, I guess that's what we can taste. Why don't we just take some time? I'm going to say 10 minutes, but if that feels like just endlessly too long, maybe you could, you know, like raise your hand. I can't see everybody on my screen. I can only see a few of you. So, or maybe you could use the chat button. I think people know how to use the chat.
Yes,
You want to say like, hey, I'm done.
Yeah, use the chat. Excuse me. Type at us, raise your hand, get our attention somehow. Whenever you're done and ready to share with us, we'd love to hear it. So if you're done before 10 minutes and you feel like sharing, yeah, just let us know somehow. Okay, so I'm gonna take my own medicine too. So I'm gonna set the timer for 10 minutes. It's my timer. Oh, Sheila already has her hand up. Oh, yes, Sheila.
Yeah, first of all, hello to everybody. And what I really like about what you said was, it's not about things, it's not about money. And in listening to you speak, it's making me think about the one thing that my dad gave me. My parents did not get along very well together, but after my dad died, my mom gave me his rosary beads. And I'm a Catholic, and he was a very devout Catholic. And that's one of the things I really, really remember about him. Anytime he walked past a church, he would bless himself. And so I don't think my mom realized at the time when she gave me his rosary beads, what it meant to me. I felt so much closer to him, and I've always loved my dad. And so it's a cheap old plastic rosary beads. It has no quote unquote commercial value or anything like that, but it has a very special value for me. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. And that's one of the things that I'm seeing in listening to, you speak. And I think that's important. It's the value behind the things, the emotional value behind things, not the financial value, but the emotional. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sheila. So why don't we take 5 to 10 minutes and see if you can go look backwards at something you received or a story you heard or experience that you had that was meaningful to you. And my plan here is if you write them and we share them and you want to publish them, I'm going to show you a website that I put together, and I'd be happy to put these stories and these images up there to share with other people. So I'm going to do the same thing. I mean, like I said, I'm going to write too, but everybody get a pen, pencil, keyboard, whatever you need, and let's take a little time and just do this practice together. Okay, so I'm going to start the timer now. And if you want to turn off your camera so no one can see you writing, I completely understand that. I always do that in online courses. I won't look. So if you're happily scribbling, according to my timer, about 3 minutes left, but maybe just put your hand up if you're done. And then I'll know. You're done. Mark's done. Barbara's done.
Oh, Teresa's done.
Yeah, a lot of people have their cameras off, so it's hard to know.
Video.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we can wait a few more minutes.
Liza, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. I just unmuted myself.
Good job. Would you like to share?
Yes.
Great. You know, I turned this on to gallery view and I feel much better because I can see some of you anyway. All right.
Oh,
So this is Judy, right? You're sharing?
yes, that's right.
Okay. And John.
And John.
Okay.
Well, my mother loved to write poems about the children in the family. My younger sister put together many of these poems into a binder and gave one both to me and to my other sister. My mother wrote about the births of her grandchildren and their milestones like going to school and graduating. And come to think of it, I'm going to have to make copies for my grandchildren. This is a good reminder for me to do that.
That just made my whole day. Awesome. Anybody else like to share their experience of what they came up with, or even just if it was hard to do it, you know, why it was hard to do it? That's also fair because I think some people really struggle with this.
They do, and that's why it's good to have those examples that you presented at the beginning of the class. The paperweights, etc., the poems, the stories.
Fantastic.
I have a little something that sticks. Well, excuse me, I'm a little emotional about it. I was born in England on September the 11th, 1936. My mother told me that when war was declared, she picked me up and held me for many hours very tightly.
Can you understand?
So, oh, sorry. It's a little bit hard to understand, but it sounds like a story we should all hear. Do you want to try? You could write it into the chat box, and then everyone could see it. Is that?
I could write it.
Could I read it?
You can read it. I'm gonna
Okay.
let my dog in because he really wants to hear these stories. So start reading. Really, dear? Okay, we're all ready.
Okay.
Tater.
John was born on September 11th, 1936, and his mother told him a story that when the war was declared in 1939, she picked him up and held him for many hours. His father was in the police force in the Chesterfield, Derbyshire, and he was an only child. His mother shared her
Ration book.
her ration book with him, donating her egg ration to him. We listened to the bombs falling in Sheffield, England, and that's his story.
So thank you for sharing and thank you for reading that. It's a lot easier to understand.
So that's something to pass down to the next
Yeah.
generation.
Yeah, and we also have something in the chat box from Jane. Jane, would you like to share that with the group? Are you speaking it, or did you just want to put it in the chat? We'll never know. Well, I'll read it for Jane. So my grandma influences me a lot. Of her own sayings translate to English like generosity is always blessed. She was always smiling with good words to everyone, no matter our family or someone first time meeting. She passed away around 40 years ago, but her wisdom saying still very useful in my everyday life. See, so thank you for sharing that. Who else would like to share?
We have a few raised hands. Oh,
All right, sorry.
Teresa.
I'd like to share a little bit. I am an immigrant. I came to this country for graduate studies many, many years ago. And then I do have a lot of stories to tell about my childhood and how I came to this country, and then what was happening to me during my career development, and then how I encountered a lot of discrimination in this country, sorry to say, and then my marriage, etc. I really wanted to write a book about this, about myself and about other friends who had similar experience, but their experience may be different from mine because we have a different environment to being in this country. But I wonder, but I'm always hesitate because I'm not sure if my children are interested in our story. And instead of, understanding us, maybe you'll give them a burden. So what do you think about it? I'd like to seek opinion from the audience.
I say do it. I think those stories will be lost otherwise, and they're going to regret not hearing them.
Maybe we could do a memoir writing workshop through Avenidas, as a follow-up to this. I'd be happy to facilitate something.
And
writing.
sometimes-
Oh, sorry.
and sometimes your children may not be interested now, but they will be interested. They will be interested when they're older. Now, I have such regrets. I didn't ask my parents things I wish I had done. I just wish I had been more present in their lives.
Well, thank you for your comment.
Marcia, did I see your hand up?
Yes.
How about it?
Okay. My Aunt Joy called me one November late in her life and said, I'm done Christmas shopping, but I have a house full of stuff. What would you like? I said, oh, Aunt Joy, I want the movies you took of us as kids. I grew up the youngest of four on a dairy farm in Iowa, and we were poor, didn't have a movie camera. But Aunt Joy and her husband lived in Southern California, and every summer they'd drive back to Iowa to see family, and they brought a movie camera and would take moving pictures of us. So a couple weeks later, a box of Super 8 movies arrived on my doorstep. I didn't have a movie projector, so I used my kids' microscope to look at them. Many were scenery that taken out of the car as they drove. So I had to sift through hours of movies to find the little bits that she had taken of us. But I ended up with a half an hour's worth of video of my siblings and me as children, and taped them together and had a DVD made of them and gave it to my siblings for Christmas that year. There was only one photo of me before I started kindergarten. So this was the most I had ever seen of myself in my early childhood years. And it was something to really cherish.
Thank you for that. I'd love it if you posted that picture of yourself with that story to the website that I'll introduce you all to at the end. Kat, I'm going to let you pick people because you offered it and you're so good at it.
So we have Mark next with his hand up. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, sure. One thing I never thought would be as valuable to me as it is. Older people, those who may notice this, often have a much more difficult time with like toenails than people only 10 or 20 years younger. And my mom had a lot of tools for taking care of toenails. And I thought, okay, that's her stuff. it never occurred to me that it would be of value to me. So now this is mine, and I use it a lot. You know, there are things like prying it up and cutting this way and slicing that way and whatever. And it saved me the trouble of having to go. You see, I think a lot of older people have to go and see a foot doctor or some specialist who does it for them. But I'm totally independent because I get this nice little box from my mom that has that hardware in it. Anyway, that's one thing. Something that I find really valuable, and I didn't get very many of these directly, I sort of sought them out on my own, are pictures of my parents or my grandparents, aunts and uncles or whatever. And I've thought about which pictures I like the most. And those are the ones that are really clear and you get a full view of the person and they're showing some emotion and there are like other people in the picture too that, you know, they're close to. And then a few other specific things that I got that I like. My great grandfather built this wooden box for putting jewelry in. I don't keep jewelry in, I just keep stuff in it. But I just like it because he made it. And he actually personalized it for my grandmother with her initials on it. It's actually her maiden name initials, which is cool. I also got a knife that my uncle had used. He was a cook in the Merchant Marine during the war. And, you know, this is the knife that he used then. And I've got some embroidered stuff from my great aunt and oil paintings. My mom and a few other ancestors have done that. So those are the things that I have that I like. One thing that's kind of intangible that for sure I've gotten from my parents are ideals and philosophies, rules for life and attitudes. And they never really wrote them out or never even specifically told me. I just sort of figured it out over the years. But those are things that have guided me and I really like having. That's the end.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
You should post your address so we can come over to get our feet done.
I actually live in Utah, so it might be a long walk.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
It'll be a long drive, but it'll be worth it. All right, Pauline has her hand up next. Go ahead, Pauline.
Yes, I have, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
I have actually a negative gift given to me by my mother regarding my paternal grandmother. And my mother always used to say, grandmother had two moms, but refused to explain any of this. But it started me on a genealogical research trip. And I've now found the real origin of my paternal grandmother. I've actually found the actual papers documenting her birth and now have an extensive family tree. What I need to consider is to whom am I going to leave this history, since I have no family interested in having it.
I wonder if you're of a certain cultural background or anything like, you know, Japanese or Jewish or something associated with an association or a museum or historic site that may be interested in having it.
Unfortunately, no.
Hmm.
I've got an idea. There's a website that I use that you subscribe to, but it doesn't cost anything. You just sign up and it's free. And they have this tree of, you know, millions or hundreds, a large number of people on it. Well, it's all dead people. There's no living people because of privacy. And on that, it's crowdsourced. So people mostly put their ancestors on and people have common ancestors. And besides the usual stuff like where they were born and died, and that kind of stuff, there's a place for stories. And I've done that for my ancestors and even for other people that I know that I've like lived across the street that I had stories about them. So it's called FamilySearch.org.
Yeah, can you put that in the chat for everybody to see?
Sure, be happy to do that.
Awesome. Was there anybody else who wanted to share something that came out? Oh, I see Jeff.
Jeff, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, hi. Well, this is going to become a writing assignment. I reached over on my desk and I pulled out, this is my mother's cross pen. And when I was growing up, having a cross pen was a really significant certainly a significant gift that was only given on very special occasions, maybe a high school graduation or college graduation. This gold cross pen was my mother's favorite. It was given to her by my father on their 40th wedding anniversary. And, it's still in its case that my mother always kept her pen in. And that says a lot about my mother. She wanted things that were special to be cared for and considered and protected. So it's just interesting for me, and always makes me think of my mother when I write with it. And then I'll just mention, it made me think as well of a pocket watch that my father gave me. He received it from his father on June 20th, 1930. And that's when he graduated from high school. He was born in 1913. And my grandparents on my father's side were very poor. And to have a silver Hamilton pocket watch for his high school graduation was an incredibly significant gift that I'm sure his family really had to scrape and save for to give this to him. And so my father gave it to me on April 3rd, 1975, and that's when I turned 12. And I learned later that the reason he gave it to me when I was 12 was, instead of perhaps when I graduated from high school a few years later, was because he was 62 at the time. He'd just retired that year, and he'd had kind of a mild heart attack. And he was afraid that maybe he might not live to give it to me when I graduated from high school. And I'm really happy to share that he lived another 20 years. So, but I cherish this stopwatch. And again, it says a lot about my father and about our family and the love that we shared. So anyway, thanks for letting me share those couple of things.
No, that's great. I think we have time for, if there's maybe one more person to share, and then I kind of want to wrap this up and kind of pull it together at the end. So is there anybody else who wants to share? There's no obligation to do that. Okay.
Karen, did you have anything you wanted to share? And also Mark went ahead and posted, it was familysearch.org. He put that in the chat. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, so this is Whitney Family Genealogy, which you can't tell from my last name. But this is my maternal grandfather, and he got caught up in the genealogy craze in 1975 during the bicentennial. And he put together stories, and what I love about it is I'm not sure they would all be scholastically verified, but it's his version. And some of it is indeed 12 generations from 1553 to 1977. But the crux of this wonderful self-published book is that it has stories of growing up in New England and Vermont. And my children actually use this as a document for school projects because it told about cutting ice in the river. And it went into a lot of detail, and they had it from their great-grandfather's stories. So Liza, I think the bent of all of this is that the details that don't get passed down in objects are the crux of the matter, I think. The sayings from somebody's grandmother. And it's hard to remember how to pass them on, I think.
Well, this is great because you are just wrapping it up much more eloquently than I could. So yeah, so it's the details, and it's the everyday things that we miss about the people we love when they pass away that make legacies last, I think. And so First, I wanted to thank you all for giving this a shot and for participating and for making yourselves a little bit vulnerable and remembering things that can be hard and sharing ideas about like FamilySearch.org. That's incredibly great. And I wanted to, so two things. One, I'm going to share my screen for just a second because I want to show you. Okay, so I want to show you one last slide, which is, okay, now I'm not sure what you're seeing. Do you see it says let's share on the screen? I think so.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you want to send me your story and picture to this address, so liza.hanks@gmail.com, I'll post it on this website, and this is a screenshot of the website. It's called What Lives Longest. And some of the stories I shared with you are on there. And so there's you'll see a picture and then there's the story. And I'm happy to post those for you. Just give me the name and the picture. So that's my first request. And then, yeah, I'm trying to get this to move down the screen. Yeah, and so this is just how you can contact me, but actually let's stay here. For this project, just use lizahanks@gmail.com. Or I guess you could send it to Avenida somehow. Maybe we could come up with a mailbox or something and we can share it with each other.
They can send it to me and I can forward it off to you.
Yeah. And when we get together next time, maybe you can spend the next couple weeks thinking both ways, thinking retrospectively about ways in which gifts have touched you, and then use that as a way to inspire yourself. For now, in our next class, we'll hopefully be able to spend some time together thinking. My idea was that we would come together next time and think about what we would like to share with people. And then the third class, how to make that real. So with that, I'm going to close the class and thank you so much for coming. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Liza.
My pleasure. And I'm very happy my dog didn't make any trouble. He's sitting here on my lap, just very happy. So
What a good